All right, guys, welcome to ATI TEAS Level 2 practice test. So we have 4 of these in total. Level 4 is the most difficult. Level 1, for most people, is the easiest, but it does depend a little bit on how comfortable you are with some math stuff, and that Level 1 and 2 has the math. 3 and 4 is strictly focused on bigger science topics. And there's also some uh, English and like paragraph comprehension type stuff that also show up in level 1 and level 2. Okay, so I think most people would say the level 2 math is a little harder than level 1. So the way I would go about doing this would be the same for each of these practice tests. Is all of the questions and the answer choices are in the description. So I would go and do that first, answer all the questions, then watch the video, see how you did on the test, and also um, get a bunch of reasoning and feedback about how to address each of these questions. Right, so that would be the best way. I should mention, so in early February 2021, our mobile app will be available. Right now it's like the middle of January, so a couple weeks away. But that'll be available, and I think that will be free to install and be very valuable study guide as well for the TEAS. So having said all of that, let's go ahead and jump into it. Okay, so when we get paragraph comprehension questions, first thing we want to do is try to figure out what is it that they're going to ask us before we just start reading, right? So that's really the one tip really for paragraph comp. So what type of essay would this passage be found in? And we have these 4 options, right? So is it compare and contrast? Is it classification? Is it cause and effect? And is it persuasive? And just knowing cause and effect and persuasive, if you see both of those as options, a lot of times it is one of them. Cause and effect tends to be more about something that has happened in the past, right? The cause and the effect have both already happened. Persuasive is much more about just trying to convince you of something, right? So like a typical cause and effect example could be talking about war or an election, something like that. Anyway, let's go ahead and read this. So playing music can strengthen the bridge between the 2 hemispheres of the brain. This bridge is called the corpus callosum. A study led by neurologist and neuroscientist Gottfried Schlag found that professional musicians who started playing before the age of 7 have an unusually thick corpus callosum. In a later study at Harvard Medical School, a study found a 25% growth of the corpus callosum for those children who practiced 2 hours a day. For those who did not practice, there was no observable growth. Having your children practice music could lead to a bigger corpus callosum, which means a greater connection between the 2 hemispheres of the brain. This benefit would be seen in skills like creative problem solving. Okay, so it does seem like that he's trying to just convince us of the value, much more than there's a slight compare and contrast when he says, or it could be she, I don't know who wrote this. For those who did not practice, there was no observable growth, right? And that's the little bit of compare and contrast. But that's really the only sentence. The rest of it is really just trying to convince us. So we would say no for compare and contrast. Definitely has nothing to do with classification. And then we're down to cause and effect and persuasive, which we talked about a little bit here just a second ago. And again, remembering cause and effect is, if you're confused and you're not sure, is it cause and effect or is it persuasive? Cause and effect has much more to do with something that has already happened, while persuasive essays will be looking to back up their opinions with facts, data, and examples, and it won't be as obvious that it's past tense. And so because of that, we will pick persuasive essay. Answer choice D. Okay, question 2. Which of the following would be the least useful in determining word meaning? Okay, so we have dictionary and thesaurus right here, right? And just knowing that, well, Google has pretty much replaced both of these. in modern times is the nature is just for the sake of the test, knowing that dictionary and thesaurus are both useful ways to determine word meaning. The third one, detect what the word means based on context of the sentence or paragraph. So we do that all the time in our lives, right? Whether it's that we're reading something or even if we're listening to somebody talk, right? Is if they use a word that we're not sure what it means, but we know what all the other words in the sentence mean, or within the context of what they're talking about in a paragraph or over the course of a couple of minutes, is we can usually guess what that word means. And that's a really common way in which we improve our vocabularies. So answer choice C is also definitely correct, which leaves us at answer choice D. All of the above are excellent ways to determine word meaning. Okay, moving on. Question 3. Which of the following is not a primary source? Okay, so we have, so we're thinking about primary sources. They provide raw information and firsthand evidence. That's what we're thinking when we're thinking about primary sources. So immediately, a journalist writing about a local election that they're covering, you would think that would be one. Textbook doesn't seem like it so much. Eyewitness account of a crime would definitely be firsthand. And then manuscript. A lot of times people get confused on manuscript, right? Between manuscript and textbook for those two options. So some examples of primary sources include interview transcripts, manuscripts, statistical data, and works of art. Like those are some pretty common ones. And so you saw a manuscript within that answer choice. And so because of that, we will say that textbook is the one of these four that is not a primary source. Okay, so if a graph has two clear peaks in the data, right? So there's a peak, there's a weird looking peak. If it has two clear peaks in the data, then we say that's bimodal. If there is one clear peak, it is unimodal, okay? And so that is the difference. You will be tested on that in some form or another. So it's important to know that. And also important to know that the peaks do not have to be the same size, right? That has nothing to do with whether or not it's bimodal or not. And in fact, often the peaks are not the same size, right? But as long as there are two clear peaks, bimodal. One, unimodal, uniform distribution is just a straight line. Okay, histogram question. So a histogram can be used to show both frequencies, which is how often something occurs, or percentages, right? So our answer here will be both. Okay, it's question 6. The measurement that is most often associated with a bell curve is, okay, yeah, we want to know, is it a trend line? And then we have the bimodal and unimodal options again, or is it standard deviation? Okay, and so the answer here that we want is that thing. Okay, sorry for my terrible drawings. Okay, so what we want to know with standard deviation is that besides the fact that it is usually associated with a bell curve, the bell curve is symmetrical with its mean at the highest point and the majority of values falling close to the mean, right? So we're going to have a lot more values in this area, really close to the mean, than we are down here, down here. Okay. So it says, after taking a practice test, one study showed that those who studied for the TEAS for at least 50 hours showed a score increase of 20%. What is this an example of? Okay, and one of the key things here is it says one study. So when we're talking about causality, here in answer choices A and B, is causality is going to take way more than one study, and it's very hard to statistically prove causality. Okay, so immediately when you see this, you can eliminate anything with one study or even a couple studies. It's going to take a lot for causality. Okay, but then we also have positive and negative covariance. So positive covariance will show two variables increasing. As one goes up, so does the other. Negative covariance will have one variable go up while the other goes down. Okay, and so in this one, right, we show positive covariance. Right, as people study more, the score increases. Both of them are going up, positive covariance. Okay, so study looks to find whether people who live in the city walk more and weigh less than those who live in the suburbs. Which of the following is the independent variable? Okay, so you will see a question on independent, dependent variable. The independent variable is the cause. It is independent of other variables. The dependent variable is the effect. Its value depends on changes in the independent variable. Where people live is independent of how much they weigh and how much they walk. The study is trying to learn whether how much they weigh or how much they walk is dependent on where they live. So we would be able to say how much someone weighs and how much they walk are dependent variables, and where people live, independent. Okay, and then we get into radius, circles. Okay, so our first thing we need is, so they're going to ask us, so circle 1 has radius of 8, circle 2 has radius of 4. What is the difference of the areas? Okay, so we have a formula that we have to have memorized for this. Area is pi r squared. Okay, so first we'll do circle 1. So it says the radius is 8, right? Okay, so we've got our pi, got a radius of 8 squared, and that's going to give us 8 times 8 is 64, 64 pi, right? And then we have circle 2. 4, radius of 4, right? So we have pi times 4 squared. And 4 squared is 16. And then we just throw a pi on there at the end, okay? And then all we're going to do is we just subtract the 64 from the 16, and we get 48. Okay, and that's really how we do that. You can, sometimes they will also ask you, rather than difference, I've seen it where they ask you for the ratio between circle 1 and circle 2, right? And so then you would just have the ratio of 64 there. They both have pi on them, and 16. Okay, which can be reduced to, if we divide each of those by 16, 4 to 1. So of course that's not this question, but it is a type of question that shows up quite a bit, is just doing the ratio between the two circles, and that's how you would do that. All right, question 10. Okay, so if a rectangle has an area of 84 and a perimeter of 38, what is the length? Okay, so let's look at this. So we have a rectangle here, right? And so it's telling us area is 84, so put that here in the middle. So the length and the width are going to have to multiply to 84, and the perimeter is 38, right? So if we add up all four sides, we get 38. Okay. So really we could reduce that even more, just saying if we added up the length and the width, it adds up to 19, right? Right, so you're going to have, like, you have length here, width here, length here, width here. So you can always, if you can always divide the perimeter by 2 and then just say it length plus width is half of whatever the number they give you. Okay, so we know that So we go down here. We know L plus W equals 19. L times W is 84. Okay, so rather you can go to doing like more complicated math here, but I mean my basic feeling is usually I would like to do less complicated math so that the chance that I make a mistake is less. Okay, so at this point it's a lot easier if you just do guess and check, right? So you just look at the answer choices. Okay, so they're saying the question was what is the length, right? So what is the longer side? Okay, so it has to be the longer side. So if I pick answer choice A, right, is 4, is because I know L plus W is 19, right? There's really no way this can be true, right? Because this is the longer side, right? And for L plus W to be 19, the width would have to be 15, but the width can't be longer than the length. So immediately, I don't know why I circled it, but that answer is wrong. Okay, what about answer 2? Or answer choice B, sorry, is if the length is 7, again, plugging into our L plus W equals 19, if the length was 7, the width would have to be 12. Okay, so that's impossible. All right, so again, so I can know that answer doesn't work. Answer choice C, okay, if this one's starting to look a little better just based on the look of it, if the length is 12, then the width is 7. Okay, 12 plus 7 is 19. So far, good. 12 times 7 is 84. There we go. That's the one we want. Okay, just to make sure we don't have two answers that both work and then we have a problem. If, again, impossible, right? Right, when even just by looking at it, you could say it's impossible. If the length is 21, well, length L plus W only equals 19, so it's not possible either. Okay, so we like answer choice C, and that's the way we go through that kind of stuff. So if L plus W equals 19, if that really threw you off, you can also say 2L plus 2W equals 38 and plug in the same kind of stuff, right? All I did there was I just divided both sides by 2 just to get it down to L plus W equals 19. Okay, arc length. Arc length questions. So people do miss this quite a bit, but this is there's no reason to miss it. The main thing is we need to know, again, so we got another circle thing, right? You got two formulas, area, which we did a couple problems ago, and now we've got with arc length, you have to know circumference. So circumference equals 2 pi r. Okay, if we don't have that, there's really, you're just guessing after that. Okay, so it tells us the radius is 6. And that's all we need for circumference. So before we even get to the arc length of 120 degrees, we find the circumference of the circle. Okay, so circumference is 2 times, they said the radius is 6. Did it wrong, but like we'll just go 2 times 6. Okay, so I did 2 times r. I put the r there by mistake, but works out the same, right? And so then circumference is 12 pi. 2 times 6 is 12 times pi. That's our circumference. Okay. Now, the part that might seem confusing. So it says they have arc length of 120 degrees. Okay, so I'm gonna put this over here. So this is arc that is 120, and we need to know that a circle is 360. Okay, so we're just turning that into a fraction, right? And then you have to be able to reduce this. So 120 over 360 is 1/3. Right? If you divide each by 120, then we get to 1/3. Okay, so they're saying the arc length is 1/3 of the circle. Okay, and so all we're going to do there is go ahead and plug that in, right? So that we have our 1/3 times what we found for the circumference, 12 pi, and that equals 12 over 3 pi, or 12 divided by 3 is 4, just 4 pi. Okay, there we go, answer choice D. Okay, so there's a couple steps to it, right? First, finding circumference equals 2 pi r, but it's pretty basic calculation. And then whatever they give you as the arc length is you divide it by 360 and then reduce it down to a fraction, whatever the lowest fraction we can get it down to, and then just multiply the circumference by that fraction and you get your answer. So you got to memorize a couple steps. Seeing this done a couple times sometimes can be useful. I would check out the video on arc length, which we have at the bottom of the description. That might be useful. And then just getting some practice doing those types of questions. And so using the app is going to be one of the best things you can do there. Okay, so it says Eric weighs 90 kilograms. How many ounces does Eric weigh? Okay, and so they're always, like with questions like this, if they didn't give us this information at the bottom, then you would have more stuff that you would have to memorize. But they're going to tell you that a kilogram is 2.2 pounds, 1 pound, 16 ounces. Okay, so and they're just asking, seeing if you know how to convert the units. Okay, but they're telling you what to do. Okay, so we start off with Eric is 90 kilograms, right? And we want to multiply it by 2.2 because a kilogram is 2.2 pounds. Okay, so when we go 90 times 2.2, we get 198 pounds. Okay, so now we know that Eric weighs 198 pounds, but the question is how many ounces does he weigh? So we take this 198 times 16, and that's going to give us our ounce number. And that answer is going to be 3,168 ounces. Okay, so when you see any of these unit conversion stuff, almost always it's you start with a number, and then you're going to multiply by the first number, and then you're going to multiply by the second number. Okay, it's like almost always. Like I'm trying to think of an example where that's not true, and I don't immediately come to one. Is almost always that's going to be what you're doing. Next one, question 13. It is 80 degrees Fahrenheit outside. What is the temperature in Celsius? Again, same kind of thing, which is like they're giving us the formula here, right? If not, then it would be like we had to memorize the formula for Celsius to Fahrenheit. And they gave us, right, the one variable that we don't have is F when you look at this equation, right? C equals F minus 32 times 5/9. But they said, right here, it's 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So all we're doing is 80 minus 32 times 5/9, right? And so then it's just calculating a couple numbers, right? And we're going to be there. So 80 minus 32 is 48 times 5/9, right? And once we multiply 48 times 5/9, we get 26.6. So it's 26.6 degrees Celsius. Okay, and that's all you got to do there. Pretty straightforward. Okay, question 14. Neither my roommates nor myself have, or got very much money. Hopefully we didn't pick got. Okay, so hopefully that was not one of the answers that anybody went with, and hopefully it was really between has and have. Okay, so when subjects are joined by the word neither or either, the rule is the same. The verb agrees with the subject closest to it. So in this case, the closest is myself, and therefore the correct verb is has and not had, or not have. Okay, so that makes it singular. Okay, and then we have for the grand opening last week, Brad's Toyplex blank away free bicycles to the first 50 customers that came through the door. Is it gives, gave, is giving, or is it got? So gives and is giving are both present tense verbs. Gave is past tense. The action took place last week, and so gave is the one we want. Gave is in the past. Okay, moving on here to question number 16. Okay, and so again with any of these sentences is we want to go ahead and look at what is it we are being asked first. Which of the following is the most likely medium for these sentences? Okay, and so what they mean by medium is it likely that you would see what is in the rest of the passage in a physician's medical chart, medical journal? Is it an ad of some kind? Is it an informal email to a colleague? Right, and especially with answer choice D there, making sure that we recognize informal email to a colleague. Okay, so what does it say? The top diagnoses leading to clinical validation queries tend to follow a pattern. So already this doesn't sound very informal, and it's likely one that will come as no surprise to even newer CDI professionals. Part of the issue is when a condition might look like sepsis and then tests come back negative, but the diagnosis is never removed from the chart or clearly documented as being ruled out. Okay, so we're looking at this for question 16. The writing style is definitely formal and quite professional, with some complicated terms in it. So that we would almost immediately rule out informal email to a colleague, and with this kind of language, also very, very unlikely that it's a medical ad of any kind. The best guess immediately is that it's an article for an academic journal. As far as the stuff about ads, is you would expect informal language and easy to understand, which is definitely not what you're seeing right here. For medical chart, you would expect it to be brief and to relate to an individual, right, the client, as opposed to, or the patient, I meant to say, as opposed to where it says like clinical validation queries. And so based on all of that information is we would go with answer choice B, right? We like that one. An article in a medical journal is very likely what we're looking at here. Okay, thesis statement. Okay, your main thing that you want to know here is that a thesis statement is an opinion. Okay, so when we see answer choice A, people who regularly eat dinner in restaurants are 87% more likely to become obese. So that is a supporting sentence, but that's not a thesis. It's not a thesis statement. Right? Americans should eliminate the consumption of fast food because it leads to preventable health issues. That would be fine as a thesis statement. And then the following sentences would have data, facts, examples, other things like that. Same with the other choices, right? So anytime you see percentages or facts, that is not a thesis statement. Okay, which of the following has to do with the kidney? So with some of the vocabulary stuff, it can get pretty challenging, and they're really just challenging your knowledge of root words. Okay, so nephro means kidney, and so a nephrologist works with kidneys, right? And so that's actually going to be the answer choice A. Subcutaneous is skin because the root word cutane represents skin. Hema is blood, and so a hematologist works with blood. Pulmon is the root word for lungs, right? And so that's kind of gives us some information on how to think about all of those. You will be tested on that stuff. It is challenging. I would definitely pay attention to our video on root words, and that goes over all of the root words that you need to be familiar with for the exam. That can be very useful. And then finally, we get to question 19. Which of the following means accelerated heart rate? Okay, so as we get into this, the key point that we would like to know first is that cardia means heart. Okay, so if I know that cardia means heart, then answer choice A and B both look good. but I can cross those two off at least. This is really a tough question, but the tachy means to accelerate, while oxo means to become greater. Therefore, oxocardia is an enlarged heart, and tachycardia means accelerated heart rate. And because of that, we will take answer choice A. All right, so as I said, that gets us to the end of the level 2 practice test. Hopefully the video has helped you out and give you a sense of where you are. Some of the, as I kind of mentioned here just at the end, we do have a bunch of videos that link to specific questions, right? And so if you got the question wrong, thinking about checking out another video that connects to questions that you missed, probably a good idea. And again, be on the lookout for our app, and the best way to know when it's coming out, just subscribe to the channel, and you'll be getting updates about when the app is coming out. Should be a couple weeks from now, so early February 2021. And I think the app will really help a ton in getting people ready for the ATI TEAS exam. All right, thanks guys.